Thank you. If you can please take your seat, because we will start the session in the afternoon. So thank you very much for coming back and being with us this afternoon. I hope you enjoy lunch. So this morning we said that we will, in this modernization of the air navigation stream, tell a story. And this story has 6 chapters. So we started with the first chapter in the first session about the GANP and how the GANP will drive the transformation of the air navigation system. We continue with the challenges that the different stakeholders are facing in implementing the Global Air Navigation Plan. And in this session, we will see how the GANP supports, more than ever, air navigation implementation in high-income economies and brings new opportunities for low-income economies. The moderator of this session is a former air navigation commissioner nominated by the United States. Prior to that, he served as the president and CEO of the Flight Safety Foundation and the director of the Air Navigation Bureau of ICAO. It is my pleasure to introduce to you to Bill Voss. Bill, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Olga. Well, welcome back to everyone. And we get to talk about some things that are really interesting and fun here this afternoon. It's before I did all those other things, I also spent a good many years implementing a lot of really big programs into a really big air traffic control system. And so implementation's always been very close to my heart. And I'll also tell you that I think that this new GANP, as it continues to evolve, is evolving in a very important direction that really does a better job of supporting implementation and giving some more insights. I think we're going to be getting a plan that's practical and flexible and allows for the innovation for both the big and the small to do what they need to do in this dark art called implementation. So in this world of implementation, it's great to start with a fantastic plan, but you can have a brilliant plan, but the brilliant plan then gets stuck in a ditch on the way to the job site, or the power doesn't work, or there's a politician that doesn't agree with you, and that's the real world of implementation. And so you need to be more than brilliant, you need to be wise as you move into this business of implementation. You need to be wise enough to know when you're facing problems that are shared by others, and that where you can use their insight in order to overcome your own dilemmas. You also need to realize, because you're unique at many times, sometimes you have your own struggles, and it's time to innovate your way out of those struggles. It's tough to tell the difference sometimes, but it takes that wisdom to do it. You also need to be wise enough to make sure that you play within the bounds so that your system integrates, it synchronizes, and you maintain the levels of safety and efficiency you wish to achieve during this difficult transition time. And finally, you need to be wise enough to keep people around you, your stakeholders, invested, your collaborators, so that when you run out of money and political capital, which happens all the time in this business, it's not a unique thing, it's a normal thing. You have the support of partners, collaborators, and your users. In that regard, I'll transition over to our first presenter, who's going to have a lot to say about these novel sorts of partnerships. Mark Hughes is the Deputy Director, Air Transport and Airworthiness, the Civil Aviation Authority of New Zealand. Mark is the CAA sponsor for the New Southern Sky program, which is a collaborative initiative to modernize New Zealand's airspace and air navigation. And I think from Mark, we're going to hear a lot about collaborative with a capital C, about how to really work with your stakeholders and an important tool that we can consider as we look how to move our own implementations forward. Mark?
Thank you, Bill, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a privilege to be able to share the New Zealand experience with you regards to the air navigation modernization. From the GANP to the NAMP. The NAMP is our National Airspace Air Navigation Program, and New Southern Sky is the implementation program that underpins it, which I have the privilege of leading. Just a little bit about New Zealand and aviation in New Zealand before I move forward. Our geographical location in the world underscores the importance of aviation for us in terms of people connections, tourism, commerce, and a thriving economy. We're a small country of 4.7 million people. We have 4 international airports, Auckland being the major hub. We have just 200 air transport aircraft. However, we have a large commercial helicopter sector, adventure aviation, and general aviation community, and we have 43 foreign airlines that fly to and from New Zealand. So how do we get started on this journey? Some of the steps that we took back a few years ago now was, first of all, to understand what the industry's priorities were. Where did they see the benefits coming from as we moved forward with our air navigation journey? Then we looked at the ASBUs, which we've heard a lot about over the last couple of days, and what was right for New Zealand, but also considering the regional environment that we work in. And then with regards to the National Airspace and Air Navigation Plan, which is essentially our high-level change management plan, making sure that that was well supported by our government stakeholders. And then finally moving into the implementation plan itself, New Southern Sky, making sure that that was fit for purpose, dynamic, and was going to deliver on the benefits that we had identified. So how do we go about it? We wanted to learn from others, many of you in this room, and we continue to try and learn the lessons of others and gain from your experience. So we met with our Australian colleagues who we work with quite closely. We visited Canada, the UK, Europe, and tried to understand the challenges that others were facing, what we might do as well to meet those challenges, and keep that in our mind when we selected a program that was fit for purpose for us. There's sort of 3 lenses that we look through in our program. First of all, it needs to be system-wide, and that reflects, I guess, the high degree of interdependency and necessary integration of all the various elements of modernizing an air navigation program. It needs to be underpinned by safety and safety performance outcomes. Safety is an enabler to achieve the benefits that we wanted to achieve. And finally, it needed to be evidence-based. We wanted to avoid that opinion-based argument and also provide a solid foundation for investment as well. We have 3 phases in our journey. We're well into phase 2 at the moment, which is really the delivery phase, and we are delivering now some of those infrastructure projects as well as regulatory change enablers. There's 8 elements to our New Southern Sky program. Of course, the typical CNS, but then all of the other elements that support that. And we have projects either completed or underway in all of those areas. However, we've prioritized our effort based on those areas that are going to deliver the most benefits. Just a little bit about the program itself. How does it work? Essentially 3 elements to it. We have program management, so we have a team, including myself, that actually runs the program and works with our stakeholders. But the actual infrastructure is delivered by our stakeholders, mostly industry, and that's obviously either in the digital format or physical infrastructure. And finally, the regulatory enablers, and I guess I wear 2 hats in that regard as a member of the New Zealand Civil Aviation Authority, making sure that the required changes to the rules or guidance material is timely and is going to deliver on the benefits that we envisage. We looked at the benefits and we did a whole benefits mapping exercise with our stakeholders. We, of course, looked at the GANP, and the ones there on the left are from the GANP. We distilled those down to the 4 that you see there in the middle that are our sort of driving benefits, if you like. But we also recognize that from those flow some additional system benefits, wider system benefits. And I guess those are the synergies that come with harmonized effort, integration, interoperability, and alignment between the regulator and industry, which is very important. And we've just gone through a recent cost-benefit analysis exercise based on some real data that we have now, and it's showing that we're actually delivering benefits, real benefits in all of those domains, which is really positive. As I said, one of the lenses that we looked at was safety, and we wanted to underpin everything with a strong safety foundation. So what we did, again working with our stakeholders, was developed a set of system safety criteria, which I'll talk about shortly, but these are the minimum safety requirements that any of the projects in New Southern Sky have to meet. Then we did a concept of operations exercise with our stakeholders, really to identify or create our vision for the future. What did we want the system to look like in 2023? We picked a time in the future, and we identified what that looked like, so we're working towards a common goal. And finally, we have the projects that flow from that in the 8 different element areas that I spoke about. Just on the system safety criteria, here's just a couple of brief examples. And again, these are the ones that we came up with. I would suggest that for each state, they might be quite a different set. But for us, we have a large GA population, GA community, and so that first one was very important to us, that we have a non-cooperative surveillance, such as primary radar, to help us with airspace incursion risk. And then another one I've identified there is regarding the competency of personnel, be that pilots or air traffic controllers, should we have a GNSS outage situation, such as could happen with interference, cyber threats, or space weather. And the benefits that we see from those safety criteria really is to, I guess, give some confidence that if we're going to move ahead with a project and it's soundly based on safety, then it's likely to be adopted as part of the rules, so we're not building something that at the end of the day is not going to be aligned with the future regulation. It helps to guide specific project work. All projects have to meet those criteria that are relevant to them or come up with a safety case that shows an equivalent level of safety. And it does provide a means for getting that common foundation or alignment. As I said, we did an exercise with our stakeholders to develop our concept of operations, and really it was led by the industry. We had a facilitator. Obviously, the regulator was there as well, but we really wanted to hear from the users of the system, what did they want to see? And we had a number of operational scenarios that we work with and described those in some detail, and now all of our projects are really aligned to deliver on those outcomes. So about the program, Bill mentioned collaboration. You'll be interested to know that we have no central budget for New Southern Sky. We have no executive authority, and we have no legal status for our partnerships. So really we're relying, I guess, on the goodwill and the buy-in from our stakeholders that this is an important project that they want to get behind. And so the value proposition for them is the synchronization that comes with working in harmonization with the other members in the system. So for example, if they just went off and developed an infrastructure project on their own without working within the New Southern Sky framework, then perhaps the timing of that or the relevance of that might not line up with the other work that's going on. So I think all of our stakeholders in the main have seen the benefits of that and are quite willing to work with us. But there is the importance of leadership as well. So the CAA, given that we are a safety regulator and safety underpins the whole system, it was appropriate that we lead the program, but we do so with some of our partners, such as the Ministry of Transport and Airways, which is our air navigation service provider. And the projects are being led by the stakeholder that it's most relevant to. So we've got approximately 26 projects underway at the moment, about half of those being led by the regulator and about half being led by industry, but there's common elements in all of those. And we have a very active working group made up of all of our stakeholders, including industry participants. They're really our consultation panel. We check in with them to make sure they're satisfied with the progress. We test ideas, we seek their ideas, and we're making sure that whatever we're doing is relevant, is going to be practical and beneficial, and by doing so, we're hopefully promoting buy-in and support. And finally, just a few insights, what we've learned on our journey. It is really all about benefits. It's taking the time up front to map out where those benefits are and aligning the effort to those that are going to deliver the best benefits. It's making it fit for purpose in your own national context, being mindful of what the international standards are, but also having something that works for you. And one size does not fit all. We've certainly seen that in our different approaches to air transport and general aviation. Be flexible. The plan is a good starting point, but we've seen a number of changes to our plan along the way, and so I would encourage you to do that. And certainly the evidence-based approach that we've taken has been very useful. As we know, in this dynamic area of aviation, everyone has an opinion, and if you let things devolve to opinion-based argument, it's not very constructive. So we've done a lot of research, and we encourage our stakeholders to do their research as well, so the discussions are very well informed and normally constructive. And then focus, I guess, on pragmatic solutions. Accept that there's always going to be risk. There is always risk in aviation. Do your best to manage that, but then be bold and move forward. And that's certainly been our journey, and we're still on the way, but it's so far it's delivering some benefits. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mark. That, I think that sort of sets the tone, I think, for this afternoon. I never thought I'd actually look at a major forward-looking modernization of a system without centralized executive authority. That takes collaboration to a whole new level, and it's exciting to also underline the fact that when you read the GANP, you have a lot of room to maneuver. You have a lot of room to innovate, and that's evidence of it right there. And, oh, by the way, even though you're trying to make efficiencies and even though you're working with the users, notice that safety stayed front and center the entire time. And not only was it not compromised, but I would argue that it was actually probably enhanced just because of the fact you're bringing it front and center and working with your stakeholders to establish your target. And that in itself is a very powerful thing. So let's go back and start taking a look at other very different approaches, again, to try to get benefits and get synchronizations in a different part of the world with different challenges. Our next speaker will be Maria Grazia, excuse me, a little gas in there, the Piscopia. And she is working as the Cesar Deployment Manager, Deputy Director of Technical and Operations, as well as the Deployment Program Manager in Cesar. Her main tasks are related to the development and maintenance of the deployment program. Now, I'll have to preface this by saying that, a lot of people look at Europe as a big monolithic modern thing, but it's also a very diverse environment. And so what you have here is a whole new set of challenges of how do you keep the Germany and France aligned with all of the other surrounding states, and how do you keep everything synchronized and going forward for maximum benefits. And so let's hear about how that is being tackled in Europe right now. Thank you. Please.
So, thank you, Bill. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure for me to be here today, notwithstanding the weather, that for an Italian is really challenging. So, I will talk to you about and will present to you today the approach that we are following in Europe. So, the performance-based approach that we are following in Cesar, from the planning to deployment. So and then I will drill down a little bit more on the activities of the CESAR Deployment Manager. Because, you know, CESAR Joint Undertaking and CESAR Deployment Manager are two important pillars of the CESAR projects. Even if the scope is different, because CESAR Joint Undertaking is really working on the research and development and on the planning, CESAR Deployment Manager is working on the coordination and synchronization of deployment. However, the target is always the same, so the goal is the same. That is ATM modernization to achieve a safe, efficient, and performing aviation system. So, what is the deployment program? Because all of us are aware, of course, of the ATM master plan, but I would like to explain to you also what is the deployment program. The father, if we can call like this, is always the ATM master plan. However, the European Commission decided that what was ready for deployment in the European ATM master plan and needed a synchronization approach could be translated into a regulation that in Europe we call it pilot common project. Then it was the task for CESAR Deployment Manager to develop a program for the coordination and synchronization of implementation. What is the content of this regulation? Of course, at high level, it is divided in 6 ATM functionalities. There is a new wording, but is what you talked about in these days. So within there is the performance-based navigation, free route airspace management, initial swim implementation, airport throughput. So all functionalities that are described at high level within the regulation with a clear reference on by when these functionalities needs to be implemented. Then it was the task of the CESAR Deployment Manager, that is a consortium of industry. So it's really industry working for industry. It's a consortium of airspace users, airports, and NSP. So we developed the deployment program, which main target is to guide the ATM investment plans in Europe for all the stakeholders, of course, that are impacted by the regulation. It reports on the status of implementation of the program and so of the regulation all over Europe, identifying where the gaps are, and so where there is more need of intervention. And it also it is a guidance for the stakeholders to deliver the pilot common project, so the regulation on time, but that is the real difference with a synchronized approach. Because during the years we understood, and that's why the SDM was created by the European Commission, that the plan was not enough, the regulation was not enough, there was the need to synchronize the investments of operational stakeholders, without which the real performance benefits cannot be reached. So here, of course, there are a lot of similarities and more than similarities, synergies between the GANP and the ATM master plan, and consequently with the deployment program. But the real difference is that the deployment program has a binding nature for the operational stakeholders in Europe. And that's why the details are really a lot within the deployment program, because we sequence the implementation targeting each individual stakeholders that has to implement a specific technology, and explaining also by when and how. So of course, we saw that there are a lot of benefits in synchronizing, and we identified some areas of work, because the synchronization cannot be done by SSR deployment manager alone. The real key is to work together with the investing stakeholders, with industry. So it is together with industry that we define the target dates, at least the intermediate target dates, and to the critical approach to deploy. We define which is the common reference that can be used for ground and space user stakeholders. We define together with the stakeholders the sequence of deployment. It is really the added value. So to have the technological sequence to achieve the performance benefit identified within the regulation. Of course, together with the stakeholders, we define all the urgent needs, because through the monitoring that we do all over Europe, we are able to identify what is missing in terms of implementation, but also where it has to be done in Europe. We also are able to, we work with them and we provide them all the set of necessary information in terms of all its the reference material that can go from the relevant standards to the means of compliance. And of course, last but not least, together we work at the identification, early identification of the risks, deciding with our stakeholders also how to mitigate these risks. So all in all, deployment is happening, SSR deployment is happening. Today we are coordinating 299 projects all over Europe, so also beyond Europe, so 34 are the states involved in the deployment, and 85 are the industry organization participating to deployment. Airspace users, air navigation service provider, NSP, airports, and of course also manufacturing industry. All in all, we are talking about 2.5 billion of investment supported by European Commission in terms of funding, up to 1.1 millions, more or less, billions. So now, the topic discussed today was also related to the performance, and so how we work on the performance. Is the work that we are doing delivering the right level of performance? So we worked very hard on that since the definition of the regulation on the pilot common project that is then translating in the deployment program. So CBA was performed in order to demonstrate that the content of modernization efforts have a positive business case for all European ATM network, and is, of course, preserving safety as a paramount. This was done since in 2014. Then, within the deployment program, we shared with our operational stakeholder a standard approach on performance. This was shared and agreed by all the stakeholders, and is used when the stakeholders are proposing projects to comply with the deployment program, so to comply with the European regulation. So from SDM side, there is a pre-assessment of these projects in order to check if the performance benefits are really reached, and this is done before we put the project under our remit, but also is done when the project is ongoing, because there are some intermediate steps where we check the performance results of the project under our coordination. Of course, we are, the duration of the regulation is up 2025, 2026, and we are also planning to have a full CBA assessment, again by that date, in order to demonstrate what are finally the actual benefit reached with the implementation of the whole regulation by all the involved stakeholders. So, how CESAR contribute to performance? Here you have some data. So as you can see, there are increased in capacity from the airport, TMA, and route side. There is a decrease in terms of fuel consumption and emission per flight, as well as a decrease in air navigation costs. Of course, in all these parameters, I have to say that actually, around CESAR, around 60 CESAR solutions are deployed all over Europe, and 2/3 of these solutions are enabling safety benefits. So the safety remains stable even if the traffic is increasing. So here you see the data that we have, the detailed data that we have for each ATM functionality. I know that the wording is not known by many of you, but for example, behind AF1 we have performance-based navigation and extended urban. Behind ATM functionality 2, we have airport throughput and safety net at airport level. AF3, where we have the highest benefit is free route, airspace management, and of course advanced flexible use of airspace. Big gains in performance are also in ATM functionality 4, that is coordinating the network management coordination, and in AF5, that is initial swim. Unfortunately, you see that the discount net benefits is going below, but it's normal because you know better than me that the swim is infrastructure. So it's infrastructure, and is contributing, the investment on infrastructure are contributing transversally to all the other implementations and functionalities. So all in all, which is the key of success for from the experience gained in these 3 years, is really the collaborative approach that we have with industry. It's industry working with industry. We have internal mechanism to facilitate this. So there is the stakeholder consultation platform where all the changes, all the technical implementations are shared with the operational stakeholders, and is a way to really, at the end, gaining the buy-in of the operational stakeholders. So they deploy because they believe in it, because they believe in the results in terms of performance that will be achieved. We organize workshops as well, because one thing is to read things on the paper, but then when you start deploying, when you start getting operational, there are some issues that need to be solved, needs to be tackled together. So that's why we organize also this, the workshop to share our experience with and other stakeholders' experience with our stakeholders. We coordinate the implementation. This means that the 299 projects that I mentioned before are contacted, and the leaders of the projects and all the contributors are contacting almost day by day to check how the project is going, if there are difficulties, where are the difficulties, and how to solve these difficulties tomorrow. Tomorrow, my colleague Heiko Tepper, that is in the room, will talk about this a little bit more, really on the realization side of deployment. And of course, last but not least, we support as our deployment manager the access to funding from our operational stakeholders. So we follow the process and we analyze with the industry the needs. We analyze the proposed project, the compliance with the regulation, and we support all the administrative burden of preparing a proposal in order to get funding and to deploy finally CESAR. So it's really the case. The CESAR deployment manager motto is let's deliver together, and we strongly believe in this because our success is linked to how we work together with industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria Grazia. There was, very different problem, important key points. Both of those approaches you just heard, highly collaborative, highly performance-based, but very different in terms of structure, execution, executive authority, funding. And both of them completely compliant with the boundaries set out by the GANP, completely within our abilities to execute. So there's plenty of room to innovate on the how. Let's talk about even innovating on the what that gets done. Our next speaker is Captain Fola Kinkatu from the Nigerian Airspace Management Agency. He is the managing director of that. His previous offices were the CEO of Air Contractors Nigeria, Director General, the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority, Rector of the International Aviation College, and Managing Director and COO of IRS Airlines. And he's going to be talking to us about real innovation on the substance, on how to leapfrog, to take advantage of the opportunities from new technologies and from the flexibilities you have when you're in a developing state. Thank you. Please.
Thank you, please. Good afternoon. I am going to be talking to you about leapfrogging. Where's my frog? Oh, there it is. Somehow, with the cold weather out here, I wish I could just leapfrog back home, sunny weather, and then leapfrog back here just in time. But like they say, wishes were horses. Everybody will ride. So I have to stick with the cold weather for now. The objective of this discussion will be to identify ways and means to ensure the interoperability and enhance safety using the concepts of leapfrogging without, and I want to emphasize this, without compromising safety. It is essential that in the concept of leapfrogging as a means of solving your problems, safety is not compromised. A problem statement. The developing countries have a challenge. The airlines, particularly the foreign carriers, want to come into Nigeria. They want an ILS to operate. They want all the fancy works that is available in Europe or in the Americas. But the challenge we face is that we may not be able to provide these things to them. And sometimes when you look at scarce resources, limited capability, human capability, bringing into the system technology that is available today, and the cost of it, we might not be able to provide them. By the time we save enough money, put the budgets together and get these systems in place, we already have a new thing going. Classic I think about sometimes is the iPod or the iPad. When the iPad was released, everybody said it will not replace the computer. It won't replace the laptop, but I'm sure it has. Today, you can virtually walk around with your iPad and all the other things you can do. You can print, even without a USB. So today for us, The idea of being able to meet the targets of the Western world with limited resources requires that we be innovative in how to manage and solve these problems and be able to provide safe and reliable services to our stakeholders. Quite often, like I said, we are saddled with the problem of trying to fix a problem with limited resources. By the time we put these things together, new technology has come up. So we continuously sort of be behind. For us to play catch up, we have to innovate. There are, 1,001 ways to look at the concept of leapfrogging. But one that strikes me particularly is a situation where states with poorly developed technology or economic basis can move themselves rapidly through the adoption of modern systems without going through intermediary steps. Why do we need to leapfrog? We've heard so often that traffic growth globally is going to increase and double in the very short term. In Africa, we are growing at about 5 to 7% annually. And coming back home to Nigeria, Nigeria has the biggest economy today in Africa. I can tell you that with the number of private jets I see around, I definitely know that even though I don't have that kind of money, there's money around the corner. The point is, Nigeria is growing. Traffic is growing. When I started my flying career, we only had Nigeria Airways. And we had about 11 airplanes. But it has grown to the point where today, I can't even count the number of airlines that we have in Nigeria on my fingers. And each time, there are people who are applying to become carriers. So, with the population, and again we look at the population of Nigeria, Nigeria has a population of 180 million people. If and when we can fly 1% of that, we'll definitely need more airplanes. Now the question is, how do we accommodate this increased traffic? How do we put into system technology that we ensure that these airplanes are able to land in time and be able to depart on time and efficiently? In trying to leapfrog, there are a couple of examples that I will give on how we met the Global Air Navigation Plan. In 2012, we implemented performance-based navigation in 24 airports. We all know that with a PMB system in place, we are able to plan more approaches, get more airplanes in the system with reduced conditions, and thereby be able to increase the traffic flow. Yesterday I was called and informed that they had difficulties due to door stays, and if the airlines had the technology on board to take advantage of what we had put in place in performance-based navigation, they will be able to do more landings. And Nigeria also plans to deploy ADS-Bs and multi-lat in the Gulf of Guinea. In the Gulf of Guinea today, we have quite a number of airplanes flying without quote-unquote being captured, particularly low-level aircraft, the helicopters. We need to be able to have that in real time, ensuring that at least we can guarantee safety and safer skies in that corner of the country. And in medium and long term, Nigeria will be implementing an increase in the performance-based precision approaches using GBAS and SBAS when the concepts are fully developed. How can we use today's technology that is on the street to be able to achieve what we want? We have the application of mobile phones for coordination of traffic by ATC using the closed user group. I think it's taking for granted power is taken for granted in this part of the world. But you won't believe the cost to us to be able to maintain our navigats using, particularly in remote areas, diesel that is burning AGOs, generators that are burning AGOs 24/7. To be able to reduce this cost, which we'll obviously have to pass on as a cost recovery method to the stakeholders, we deployed solar panels. So solar power is used increasingly in providing power to a lot of our nav aids so that we can drive costs down and make the airlines economically efficient, because by being able to make a little more money on their bottom line, they will be able to do better. The implementation of surveillance data sharing to enhance interoperability between Ghana and their signal states is essential. That in that corridor of Africa, in the African sub-region, we have to be able to ensure that we work together and benefit from the economies of scale, because if we are able to lean on each other and deploy situations where we don't have to repeat in very close states. Ghana is only 45 minutes from Nigeria. If we can exchange information and data and reduce costs. Can we use mobile phones in another method? Sure. The use of mobile phones for safety data collection and reporting. The use of internet protocol for the innovation in the provision of e-flight planning and e-NOTAM. Today we do not have a fully deployed AIS, and can you believe that we are still talking about not achieving AIS, and most people are talking about achieving AIMS, and now we are talking about SWIM. So we might be playing catch up, but we also have to be able to use other means to be able to deliver what needs to be delivered. We have the use of software applications and internet protocol for the enhancement of business processes relating to requests. By the way, in Nigeria, this might be a pitch for government, but we have in place now executive orders that require that we deliver within 24 hours to our customers. ARPAS was in Nigeria recently, and one of the things that came off it was we started looking at the possibility of using drones as a method of flight calibration. I believe the technology is being looked at in Spain, I think. And if we can use drones to be able to do our flight calibration, it will reduce costs and obviously reduce the carbon footprint that regular airplanes will have utilized. We've also done leapfrogging initiatives by exchanging programs between adjacent states and IFRs. We've used the use of in-house software applications for the recording and playback of ATC, and the use of CCTV cameras to supplement the view of aerodromes. Airports are generally large areas, and in dusty environments, you can be sure that you need more than, particularly in this age where security is of utmost importance, using CCTV cameras might be a way to jumpstart and be able to see what is happening at the far end of the airports. The strategies for the enhancement of leapfrogging by air and space. We have to be able to have homegrown technologies and innovations. We have to, and we are investing in research and development. One of the very critical areas for anything to move forward is human capital. We have to be able to invest, and we are investing. In the last 1 year, the Nigerian Airspace Management has invested a lot in the training of manpower. We also have to look at the cost-benefit analysis of the implementation of innovation, because it's not just enough to be able to deploy technology and not look at whether or not it would be beneficial. Again, I look at another example. There's a lot of clamor for us to put category 3. ILS is all over the place, which is taken for granted in Europe and the Americas. But then the question I ask is, if I deploy category 3 all over the place, how many of the airlines have the capability to use category 3? What is the cost of deploying category 3? Why don't I, for example, consider moving from a VOR-based approach system and then consider a satellite-based system? Can I put PMB approaches into place and leapfrog without having to go through a VOR stage, an ILS category 1 stage, and then move on to category 3? By the time I get into satellite, God knows where the rest of the world will be. So I can leapfrog by considering now a satellite-based or a performance-based system of navigation and approaches to be able to enhance the situation. And in such a manner, I will save money for the system, and I will also save money for the airlines, because bottom line for us to be able to keep the airlines going and the industry going is that the airlines have to make money. If I can reduce 10 liters of Jet A1 consumption by the airlines over maybe 1 million flights in a year, it will make a lot of difference in their bottom line. The role of ICAO. ICAO has to help us. And I look at it that ICAO has to give us technical support to states to facilitate leapfrogging in implementation of air navigation services, and work with us such that, number one, we do not, in an attempt to leapfrog, jump into the waters. Because when you leapfrog, you are leapfrogging over things, and God knows what you'll be leapfrogging into. But we need to leapfrog into safety. That's very essential. ICAO should assist states in the conduct of safety assessments on leapfrogging innovations. Is it okay for us to use mobile phones? Is it okay for us to use other things in getting information across? Are these foolproof? Are they safe? And are they secure? ICAO needs to assist states in conduct of impact assessment on leapfrogging innovations. It's not enough for me to say, well, don't deploy diesel-consuming generators, put a nuclear power plant in there, without knowing the consequences of such a thing in that environment. ICAO has to stick by and live by the implementation, the continuous implementation of the No Country Left Behind initiative. Beautiful initiative, fantastic, but we have to sustain it. ICAO will also need to give us the continuous implementation of the ICAO Human Capital Initiative. One of the things that we need more than at any time else is that we have a dying generation of professionals. I guess I'm at the last lap of my career. I've been working. So who takes my place? I benefited, like most people in my generation, with what ICAO did in Nigeria by setting up the flying school. So we have to be able to do things that will enhance human capital. In summary, I like to say that in Nigeria we have made very good attempts in leapfrogging and trying to solve our problems, taking into account the fact that we need to be able to solve the problems. We need to be able to attract people to come to our place. There will be no point in the foreign carriers coming to shoot ILS Category 1 approaches when they have equipment that is capable of PBN, and that will save them money and time. We will continue to innovate. We will continue to move forward by leapfrogging. I thank you, and I wish us well.
Well, thank you. I could talk about leapfrogging all day. That's probably the most exciting approach to No Country Left Behind I've heard in a long time, but we don't have the luxury to linger, and it's all been said brilliantly. I'll move on now to, we've all been talking about the user, and so now it's time to hear from the user. Rob Eagles is the Director of Air Traffic Management Infrastructure, headquartered here in Montreal across the street. He's responsible for all the new concepts of operation and technology relating to airspace and air traffic management operations. And Rob's going to tell us about the things they're really looking for, the things they really want, the things they're not as excited about, and actually a place where they've written it all down, which is a really handy thing to have. Please, Rob. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So, as Bill explained, I'd just like to, just very briefly, as we come towards the end of this session, just give you a little bit of insight into the airspace users' expectations with respect to modernization and development of the air navigation system. It's absolutely critical, and we all know this, that we need a plan. The most appropriate organization to develop and own that plan is ICAO, and it is the Global Air Navigation Plan. That plan must be appropriate, it must be timely, it must be effective, and it must be agreed between all of the key stakeholders. And as we move forward, we may have additional challenges and additional stakeholders to consider with respect to new entrants. And many of you may have actually been involved or actually listened to some of the sessions that have been going on this week. The key considerations with respect to any implementation of a plan or the effective planning, as we've already heard, safety must be the number one priority. This plan must ensure that the process and the implementation is efficient, leading to effective planning and investment, both on the ground where appropriate and in the air. A little bit more detail from the airspace user's perspective. The aircraft is the primary technology component for global ANS, in particular the onboard avionics, communication, navigation, surveillance. And the airlines are making significant investment in these different technologies. These different technologies must be harmonized, though, and they must be interoperable. When we're looking ahead in respect to these technologies and the airlines are planning, we have to have an open mind but be pragmatic about new concepts of operations for these technologies. These technologies must be appropriate from an airspace user's requirement. We should not have technologies looking for a solution. They must be appropriate from a business case perspective. And in the engagement and collaboration that you've heard about, all the key stakeholders need to understand what the business case is and how details, investment, and the economics are reflected in the business case. Also, key considerations for technology. We do not need multiple layers of technology in the different communication, navigation, and surveillance areas. And also, we have to have a key consideration with respect to technology. There's regulation and certification standards associated with that technology. We have technologies with different certification standards around the world, which is an additional onerous requirement not only to regulators but operators, and an additional cost. So to help with respect to the consultation and engagement between airspace users and key stakeholders, we have a document which is called the User Requirements for Air Traffic Services, URATS. And what it does is it explains the different communication, navigation, surveillance technologies in use today, evolving, and in the future. It gives a rationale for the positives and the benefits associated with each technology, and then it gives an IATA position. The information is readily available on the website, and we use it as a vehicle for active engagement between stakeholders. And from an IATA perspective, we are very happy to engage and support any dialogue with respect to ANS planning anywhere in the world, supported by our regional offices. And just to end, a few key principles from the user requirements of air traffic services, and you've heard already from some of these during the presentations. Critically, any implementation of air navigation services or air navigation technology needs to deliver a direct and measurable operational and/or safety benefit. Should follow the proper consultation process, obviously airlines, airspace users, manufacturers, service providers, and obviously involve the key stakeholders collaboratively through all of the different stages. Should be aligned with the global air navigation plan and supported by a positive cost-benefit analysis exercise during which the airlines are able to validate the benefits that offset the costs, and finally, follow the ICAO principles for ATC charges. So overridingly, yes to modernization, yes to progression, yes to the pragmatic implementation and use of communication, navigation, and technology. But it needs to be cost-effective. We need to have agreement from all key stakeholders, and we need to have business cases and operational concepts which are understood and readily able to be implemented between the key stakeholders. I've kept it pretty short, Bill, to give you a few opportunities. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Rob. And this panel has just been remarkable. I had questions, but they're really not very necessary given the speeches we've heard here. I'm just going to ask one quick question to the panel, and then I'm going to go to the audience for a couple more. So have a couple in mind, please. Mark, Maria Grazia had some charts showing some of her performance gains, which were quite impressive. You also had a real performance basis in your programs and a strong safety ethos underneath all of it. Could you give us a concrete example of where you've really been able to obtain some major benefits while maintaining that safety target?
Sure, thanks, Bill. Probably one of the single biggest gains that we've had is the introduction of performance-based navigation procedures, RNAV and RMP as appropriate, replacing legacy NDB and VOR approaches. And this has come, I guess, with a number of benefits, particularly safety, where we've now got approaches with vertical guidance, so we are protecting crew and passengers in more arrivals. Economically, we got shorter and more predictable flight paths, equaling reduced fuel burn, and that also has a benefit on reduced emissions as well. As part of that process, it's been coordinated with all the stakeholders, including looking at things like engagement with the community in terms of noise. We have got these paths, flight paths now of falling over an area as opposed to a fan. So community engagement has been really important. Aligned with that as well as we've developed a panel or created a panel for ground-based navigation aids. So we're making decisions collectively around what is the minimum operational network of navigation, ground-based navigation aids that we need in the event of a contingency, be that a GNS outage or whatnot. So I could go on, but that's probably been the single one that I would like to point to.
That's not bad. Thank you very much. Clearly, big benefits. Let me go just out to say one question for the audience, and then we're going to get back again. I saw you over there. If you go ahead, please, sir.
Hi, my name is Chris Hope from FAA Flight Standards, and it's really, I'm actually going to try to make a pitch. After listening to the briefing, especially from the gentleman from Nigeria, I'm moderating and leading a stream tomorrow on performance-based aerodrome operating minima, which is going to discuss and going to define the benefits of this cockpit-centric aircraft operations. And the discussion on leapfrogging really hit with me that this is the way to make that happen. You know, certainly one way from the operator standpoint. And I guess, you know, the challenge I think going forward, and I don't know the answer to that sometimes though, is how to be open to this concept from the ATM perspective. Because we're, you know, from the operator side, we're going to be asking a lot. You know, we're going to be asking things like, we have an airplane that's equipped to go to Cat 3 minimums on a Cat 1 runway without the infrastructure that's normally required, but it can be done safely And it certainly can be done, very efficiently based on existing technology today and technology that's only going to get better. So I just, like I said, make a pitch for that because I think a lot of these things are tying together and they're going to, they're going to really change the way that we're able to operate.
Well, thank you. I think you just helped me by summary. Let me try to work through that real quickly. There's a few really important things are said here. Let me try to capture a few. I mean, states really need to encourage innovation. And that means a pro-innovation regulatory framework has to be out there, exactly what you were just talking about. I mean, this transition is not easy. I'm not going to kid you, I've done this stuff. It's hard, but it works. You've got multiple success stories. You've also got a new paradigm emerging. As I was raised in program management, when things got tough, you went slower and took smaller steps. No one has that luxury anymore, and they're not taking that approach. As things get difficult, you look for opportunities to innovate, to try to catch up with the world that's out there because you can't afford the risk associated with small steps anymore. And that's an important point to take home, particularly when we move on to this issue of leapfrogging. You have to be looking for opportunities. States that have not been through decades of accretion of baggage and infrastructure have different opportunities to move forward than those states who have to transition a mountain every time they move an inch. And that is important. That's the key to being successful in the No Country Left Behind. And so anything we do is going to require more automation, a lot of collaboration, but we do have a formula that's captured in the new GANP that's going to give you the flexibilities and emphasize these flexibilities to move forward in this direction. Thank you all very much, and I believe over to you.
Bill, and thank you, the panel. And please go and have a coffee and join us late in 30 minutes, well, a little bit less than 30 minutes, but at 3:30 we will continue this stream and we will present the tool that we have been talking this morning about. That is the tool of the ASBU framework that would be available in the public side. Thank you.
And thank you to our panel.
Yeah.
All right. Well done, folks. Thank you.